This week I'm just going to dig right into Psalm 116 in kind of a theological way because I think it's so deeply theological. Of course, in a way, every prayer is theological, but some of the Psalms address topics kind of in fundamental theology that are especially interesting. So take this one, for example. There is a back and forth in this psalm about what God does for us, and then therefore what we can or are called to do for God. There's kind of a reciprocity of giving or doing or something like that. So you have a God in verse 1 who listens, who hears our voice and our prayers. And then the psalmist says that because God does that, the psalmist loves the Lord. And then you get a second verse similarly, because he inclined his ear to me, therefore I will call on him. So there's this trust aspect. Because God listened, I will call on God even more. And then the second section of this psalm that will be prayed in the liturgy on Sunday asks an interesting rhetorical question. What shall I return to the Lord for all his bounty to me? And what we have here is we have a theology of worship. We have a theology of sacrifice of thanksgiving, which is a big part of Christian liturgy. So the psalmist says he's going to lift up the cup of salvation and call on the name of the Lord, pay vows to God, and then verse 17, I will offer to you a thanksgiving sacrifice and call on the name of the Lord. You see this in a lot of the psalms, that right worship comes in the midst of right relationship with God, and it takes the form of this offering of thanksgiving, of a thankful heart. Sometimes there's also mention of plain old sacrifice in the sense that it's modeled in the law, but more often you have this a thankful heart is the right sacrifice. And then it's placed in a context. So it's the worship here is imagined as being in the courts of the house of the Lord, the temple, among the people. Verse 18, I will pay my vows to the Lord in the presence of his people. And then in Jerusalem, verse 18 and 19 kind of situates all of this so that our imaginations are invited to consider the worship context of ancient Israel as really being where this psalm is acted out. And then there's also a messianic theme in here. You get it in verse 15 and 16. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful ones. O Lord, I am your servant, the child of your serving girl. You have loosed my bonds. And so you get also, if you're a Christian reader of this psalm, it's hard not to think of this serving girl as Mary and the servant as Jesus, and precious in the sight of God is the death of his son. And then God, now since especially we're reading this psalm in the Easter season, you have loosed my bonds, that God raises Jesus Christ up from the dead. You don't have to go there. You could imagine the saints of old, prior to Jesus Christ, being the ones who are being given up bodily for any number of righteous actions, participating in God's action in the world, but it's hard not to go there. And you also have a confession in this psalm of the how hard this is. Verse 3, the snares of death encompassed me, the pangs of Sheol laid hold on me, I suffered distress and anguish. This was no easy thing, even for the Messiah, the servant one, to undergo. And so the psalm also contains, in addition to thanksgiving, worship contextualization, kind of a messianic vision. There's also this confession and supplication, calling on God. O Lord, I pray, save my life. And it's quite a prayer.